held is still.
Roll call, please.
Sisson. Here. Garrett.
Here.
Zumwalt. Here. Upton.
Here.
Hughes.
Here.
Payne. Fleming.
Here.
Ellenberger.
Here. We have a quorum. Welcome, everyone. I'm gonna skip a report tonight from me, and I'll promise you I'll have a couple hours next meeting. So we'll move on to any public participation tonight. Okay. All right, now we have appointments. And, we'll get that first later. Chief? Seems like you're here every meeting.
It's been frequent. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to execute these oath swearing in ceremonies. It means a lot to us, means a lot to the families. And tonight we're going to swear in Officer Amanda Sunley, who comes to us from previously serving with the Menard County Sheriff's Office and the Pawnee Police Department. She started her duties with us on Monday, and so far sounds like 2 out of 2 for enjoyable shifts. So we look forward to what she has to bring to the department, and we're really hopeful for a long and happy career. On my honor,
On my honor,
I will never betray my badge,
I will never betray my badge,
my integrity,
my integrity,
my character,
my character,
or the public trust.
or the public trust.
I will always have the courage
I will always have the courage
to hold myself
to hold myself
and others
and others
accountable for our actions.
accountable for our actions.
I will always uphold
I will always uphold
the Constitution,
the Constitution,
my community,
my community,
and the agency I serve.
and the agency I serve.
Let's have a little more applause for the guys in the hallway. Okay, now I'm looking for a motion to approve the following committee appointments. For the Plan Commission, Lee Hyde has requested to get involved with volunteerism in the city, and he's very qualified in business, so we're gonna put him on the Plan Commission. Can I have that motion, please? Thank you, sir. Alderman Garrett, second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Sisson. Garrett. Zumwalt. Upton. Hughes. Payne. Fleming. Ellenberger.
Motion passes. Now I'd like a motion to approve the following committee reappointments. On the Plan Commission, Dr. Ross Billiter, this will expire May 2028. Lee Hyde, which just was elected to fill out the term that expires May 1. This appointment then would go till May 28. Julie Elizondo on the Police Pension Board expires May 2028. Julie Elizondo and Rhonda Weatherford on the Fire Pension Board, both May 28. And Phil Sisson, reappointed to the Airport Authority, expires May 2028. Can I have that motion? Alderman Gale.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Kellenberger, thank you. Any discussion about one or all? Roll call, please.
Ellenberger. Fleming.
Aye.
Payne. Hughes.
Nay.
Upton.
Aye.
Zumwalt. Garrett.
Aye.
Sisson.
I'll abstain.
How many years has Phil been on that?
That's as long as I've been here.
accept the minutes from the March 20th, 2025 meeting.
So moved.
Alderman Kellenberger, can I get a second? Alderman Garrett, seconds. Any changes to the minutes? Roll call, please.
Sisson.
Aye.
Gerald.
Aye.
Zumwalt. Huffman.
Aye.
Hughes.
Aye.
Kane. Lemming.
Aye.
Kellenberger.
Motion passes. Now I'd like a motion to approve the expenditure report and the payroll report for the current period.
All second.
Alderwoman Hoffman,
Second.
Alderman Fleming, seconds. Any changes in the expenditure report? Roll call, please.
Kellenberger.
Aye.
Lemming.
Aye.
Kane. Hughes.
Aye.
Huffman.
Aye.
Zumwalt. Gerald.
Aye.
And Sisson.
Aye.
Motion passes. Under new business, Alderwoman Huffman.
I make a motion to approve the renewal of health insurance for the city employees effective May 1, 2025 to April 30th, 2026 through Assured Partners.
Can I get a second? Alderwoman Zumwalt, seconds. Any discussion? We have a representative from Assured Partners. If you have any questions.
I think he has a quick rundown of the plan to provide us with.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Ben Crowder. I'm with Assured Partners. We were recently named the broker and consultant for the City of Litchfield's Employee Benefit Program. Coincidentally, we are approaching renewal, which is why we're having this conversation. We went through a rather extensive analysis of the health insurance marketplace. The marketplace continues to be incredibly volatile. I will tell you, and those of you that have this packet in front of you, I just want to touch on a few things. We are currently with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois. One of the most notable things that we get from the insurance carrier is a loss ratio report. So how much premium did we give the insurance company versus how much money did they pay out in claims? And again, those of you that have this packet in front of you, you'll note that we had 187% loss ratio. To put that into perspective, a typical insurance company's loss ratio would expected, their anticipated expectation would be between 80 and 85% that they pay out in claims. So if we give them $1, they would pay out 80 to 85 cents on a claim. That leaves them margin for profit, because most insurance companies are in the business to make money. That gives them margin for overhead, and that also includes our compensation. So if the target's 80 to 85%, we're running at 187, we would have expected a very significant renewal from Blue Cross Blue Shield. I think a lot of factors at play that I could pontificate on about all night, but we were fortunate to get approximately a 5% increase from them, which is well below inflationary trend in our business. It's actually a fantastic renewal. I know we all hope for 0 increase, but 5% in my industry is actually fantastic. We also went out to the market and evaluated Aetna and Cigna, as well as United Healthcare. Those are basically our 4 fully insured carriers throughout central and southern Illinois. 2 of those declined to provide a proposal, either because they were concerned about risk or they felt like they couldn't be competitive with Blue Cross Blue Shield. United Healthcare came in with a very attractive proposal at approximately minus 12%. Now, that minus 12%, the plan designs that we have today were not mirrored by United Healthcare. There were differences in the plan designs. And we feel like a lot of that 12% reduction, and you could look at it as 17 basis points, the difference between a 5% increase versus a 12% reduction, a lot of that could be attributed to the difference in plan designs. Higher copays, higher out-of-pocket maximums, etc. Similar deductibles, but when you really dug down into the plan designs, the plans, we really weren't comparing apples to apples. So we really evaluated the portfolio of plan designs within Blue Cross Blue Shield, and came to a selection of plans that we feel really spreads minimal risk to the employee base, maybe brings some of our plan designs more in line with where the market is, and basically got that renewal down to a 0. So some minor modifications in the plans, but an effective rate pass. that's a highlight of what we did, as it relates to the evaluation of this. Questions, thoughts, concerns? Maybe not even about this, but just as the industry as a whole, I'm happy to answer questions.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the decision to, make this change, came from a combined management and employee committee, insurance committee. And, so it's not just the city's decision, haphazardly. I mean, the employees actually were involved. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think Brianne could validate that.
Yes, we formed an employee engagement committee that also serves as our insurance committee. Each city department is represented on that committee, and they all, elected to present this tonight. And so it has been well vetted by our employees.
And they were also, that same insurance committee was also part of the vetting process as the city of Litchfield was evaluating new representation before we were hired. So that decision was made by committee as well.
And I looked at lots of, healthcare packages, this is wonderful, fairly speak, that 5% is insane, good job with that. But one question I have for you, and generally you know so much about the market, I've seen a lot of places try and lock in more than 1 year. What's your perspective on that with Blue Cross and others?
Rarely, if ever, happens.
Okay.
I've been in this business 20 years. Oftentimes you will see multi-year contracts for things like dental and vision and life insurance. Those things aren't nearly as volatile, they're far more predictable. Their out-of-pocket maximums aren't as significant. When you're dealing with health insurance, the reality is there's probably someone that works for the city that's accessing care certainly every week, if not every day. Somebody's filling a prescription, somebody's visiting a chiropractor, maybe unfortunately someone's being admitted to the hospital. Someone is accessing that care every day. And we all know that life is a little bit fragile and things can turn on a dime. And so that gives insurance companies incredible pause about offering multi-year contracts. Sometimes, let me back up a second. I've seen multi-year contracts or 18-month contracts in some cases offered maybe twice in the 20+ years I've been doing this. And there were very specific circumstances as to why those things were offered. Sometimes you will see an insurance carrier offer a second-year rate cap. That has been, I don't want to call that common, but that's something that you would see more often than a multi-year guarantee, right? And that would traditionally come from a new carrier that's trying to get your business for the future, right? Where they say, okay, we're coming in year 1 at this, and we promise you no matter how good or bad things get in the following year, we will cap your renewal at X number. It's just too volatile. We would all want it. I would love it. I know Brianne and her team would love it. I know the employees would love it. It would be a great thing, but it's just, again, it gets down to volatility.
Makes sense.
Okay, any other questions for Ben? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Roll call, please.
Sisson. Gerald. Zumal. Huffman. Hughes. Kane. Fleming.
Aye.
Hillenberger.
Aye.
Motion passes. Alderman Hughes.
I'd like to make a motion to increase the staffing level of the fire department by 2 employees.
Get a second. Alderman Gerald seconds. Discussion. Adam is here to answer any questions. Just briefly, we hope this is gonna help with the overtime.
Right, that's what I was gonna say, Adam, this is taking, instead of paying the overtime, that overtime being transferred to 2 salaries.
That's the way we prepared the budget for this coming year, so this just puts our staffing levels in line with the budget that's gonna be presented.
Plus, it takes a lot of pressure off the staff to
Right.
have to work overtime and that kind of thing, so. Okay, any other questions? Roll call, please.
Hillenberger.
Aye.
Fleming.
Aye.
Kane. Hughes.
Aye.
Huffman.
Aye.
Zumal. Gerald.
Aye.
Sisson.
Okay, under building and zoning, I'd like a motion to approve a resolution approving and authorizing a demolition agreement for the demolition of 726 North Locust Street.
So moved.
Alderman Kellenberger, Alderwoman Zumal, thank you. Any discussion? Mr. Baker is here to answer your questions. Roll call, please.
Sisson. Gerald.
Aye.
Zumal. Huffman.
Aye.
Hughes. Kane. Fleming.
Aye.
Hillenberger.
Aye.
Motion passes. Now I'd like a motion to approve a resolution approving and authorizing a demolition agreement for the demolition of 511 East Hendricks. Alderman
I'll
Hudson.
second it.
Alderman Fleming, thank you. Any discussion or questions? Roll call, please.
Sisson. Gerald.
Aye.
Brumel. Sussman.
Aye.
Hughes.
Aye.
Payne. Fleming.
Aye.
Hillenberger.
Aye.
Motion passes. Alderman Hoffman, we haven't talked to you yet. Let's, why don't you take the next one?
Okay, this is, we're talking the budget workshop, right?
Yeah, presentation, I'm sorry, you're not making a motion yet.
No.
All right, we have a presentation.
Introduce or?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is our fiscal year 2026 budget. Our budget officer is Anne Marie Vampy. She is our financial consultant. She and I worked together to prepare this budget, and each department head oversaw their respective portions of the budget. So this evening, Anne Marie is going to give an overview of budget, and then each of us will share budget highlights from our own departments, and then we'll end with concluding statements. If you have any questions after each department is finished, feel free to let us know, and we can absolutely answer questions as we go. Okay, take it away.
Everyone hear me?
Yep, okay.
So I'm not gonna read every word of every page, I'm just gonna kind of do a summary of each page. If you have any questions as I'm going through it, just interrupt me and let me know. I do tend to talk fast, if you want me to slow down, just let me know. So the budget process for this year, I think it was a little bit different than last year, it was more in-house. I think we worked well together as a group, both on coming up with the revenues as well as the expenditures. The document is different than last year. I think last year was a 2-year budget, which I'm not sure that always makes sense to do. This is a 1-year budget, but it does have prior year information in it for comparative purposes. The layout of the document is a little bit different. It kind of starts very broad at the front, and then as you go through the document to the back, you'll get the detail of the various departmental budgets, and we'll go through those, in a little bit. We did compile a 5-year capital improvement plan as opposed to just 1 year. I think it's really good to kind of be able to look into the future and see what you're spending this year and what your capital demands are gonna be in subsequent years. It's not set in stone for those out years because it's obviously gonna depend on revenue sources, other emergencies that come up, things like that, but it's a really good kind of best practice to have that 5-year plan. We changed a little bit where things are budgeted on the capital side, and we're really keeping them within a limited number of funds. If it's related to operating, it's gonna be budgeted in your operating funds, which are pretty much your general fund and your lake operations. If they're general infrastructure like street improvements, sidewalk improvements, things like that, it's gonna go in your capital fund. TIF related are obviously gonna be in your TIF because you can pay for those projects with increment if you have increment available. And then obviously water and sewer is gonna stay within those funds. Those are enterprise funds, they're meant to be self-supporting, and you obviously wanna have the capital budgeted in those. One of the big things that we did, and I know we talked about this before, is consolidating the number of funds that the city has. I think we started with about 46 of them, we're gonna end with many less than that. You can kind of see the table here of how they're going to be combined. It's gonna be a big change for the departments. We will make sure that they get a really good list of where the budget is and what fund it is, what funds are commingled together. But I think it's gonna it made the budget a lot easier to do. It's gonna make your audit simpler. And it's really just gonna kind of cut down on the number of transfers that are necessary between funds to transfer cash. These are all best practice funds. The way that we group them together is really based upon governmental accounting and best practices, so I think it's gonna be a lot better going forward. You can kind of see the funds that are combined. The one thing we did do is we renamed your capital sales tax fund, and it's now called the capital improvement fund. Your capital sales tax will be deposited into that fund and spent on projects that are budgeted in that fund. I think that gives kind of a better depiction of what that fund is. Any questions? Keep going. So just some general highlights for 2025, the fiscal year that's going to end on April 30th. Your sales tax fund is gonna remain as a sales tax fund. We are gonna combine that, or the city will, I'm not sure if I'll be here, but we will combine that in fiscal year 2027. Sales tax is really a general revenue. It's a general revenue meant to support general operations, so you really should record it within your general fund as opposed to recording it separately. The reason we didn't combine it this year is the number of transfers that occurred to or from that fund. it was just a lot to combine it all, so we moved that one to 2027. Your general fund is projected to have reserves of 88% at the end of fiscal year 2025. That's a very, very healthy general fund balance, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a couple of pages. The sales tax fund, which we are gonna end up commingling, has an additional $3 million in it, so really that is general fund money, so that makes that 88% even a little bit higher. Some of your taxes that were higher than planned, your income tax in cannabis was higher than anticipated, because the capital, or the per capita rate that the state issues was higher, for 2025 than expected. Higher video gaming taxes, sales tax fund receipts are higher than they were anticipated, and your expenditures are approximately $189,000 under budget. So you have more revenue than you planned for, and you're spending less than you plan to spend, which is always a good thing. Lake Operations Fund, that is being consolidated between Lake Operations and Lake Improvement. Without that consolidation, the Lake Operations Fund would be operating at a deficit for 2025. Something that Brianne and I discussed, and going forward, we're gonna try to kind of fix that going forward. TIF funds have a combined balance of about $3.3 million. That's awesome that you've got that amount of money in your TIF funds, and you're able to continue to develop the areas within the TIF, whether it's developer incentives, infrastructure, anything like that, you're able to continue to do that within your TIF funds. And that's just gonna generate more increment as time goes on. Tourism fund, collections were a little bit less than anticipated, and then the spending was a little bit higher than anticipated. Your business district fund, the taxes went into effect on January 1st of 25, so you'll be collecting about 4 months worth of sales tax in that fund, or business district tax, I should say. It is 1%, just like the sales tax. We won't know we won't receive the first receipts until April, so we can't tell you yet whether or not our projections are gonna be accurate, but based upon the amount of sales tax that's collected, we think we're pretty close.
Anne Marie, can I ask you, I collect sales tax in the district, and my forms coming from the state still note 8.25%, not 9.25%. Has anybody looked into that?
I just verified a list from the state of Illinois. It looks like there were, I think we were left with about 9 properties that we had put on the state verification list. And then in the last list that they had sent out for us to verify for this upcoming July 1 period, they were not included. I don't believe yours was on that list, so we may need to look at that
Yeah,
separately.
we definitely need to look at that then. That's concerning.
I'll be paying that in the next few days, I'll give you a copy.
But I did receive a list from the state of Illinois, and all but 8 or 9 properties, were on the list and shown to be collecting. We can always type it into, the state of Illinois has a tax rate generator, and I plugged a few in just to test them, and it is working properly.
That's not a full form, to pay the
Yeah.
9 quarters.
Gotta look at that, yeah. Any questions? Nope. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of jump into 2026. So there's a table on this next page, page 3, and this kind of brings it all together. This is all of your funds, all of the money that the city has in the bank, in reserves. First column is where we think you're gonna end 2025, second column is your revenues for 26, followed by your expenditures for 26, and then where you think you're gonna end up at the end of 2026. I just think this is a good way to look at it because it kind of gives you a cohesive view of what the city has and where you're spending your money. I'm gonna kind of keep going, jump to the next page. I really just went through and it kind of analyzed your fund balance in each of your larger funds. We didn't do it for the smaller ones. One of my biggest recommendations, I think, is that you look at your general fund reserve policy, and we should maybe modify it a little bit. And then you should develop reserve policies for some of your other funds. The sales tax fund is gonna go away, so that's gonna become part of the general fund. You may want to develop a, policy that sets aside maybe $500,000 or $1 million of that sales tax revenue as kind of a rainy day fund or an emergency fund. If some big capital thing occurs that you need to spend $1 million on, big water main break, something like that, that you have that money kind of set aside. The general fund, like I said, you're gonna have $3.8 million at the end of 2026. That's approximately 90% of revenues. That's how your current policy reads. is you set your fund balance based upon revenues. That's really not best practice, it should really be based upon expenditures, because your revenues are pretty constant, you know, you receive the same revenues every year, they're pretty consistent, they go up and down cyclically with how the economy's running, but it's your expenditures that really continue to grow year after year, so you really wanna base your fund balance policy on expenditures as opposed to revenues. So if we do that for fiscal year 2026, your fund balance is about 66% of expenditures, net of capital expenditures, which is still a really, really healthy fund balance. So I think that a modification to that fund balance at some point during
Yes.
2026 would be a good idea.
A good way to look at it is how many days of operations and maintenance do we have in reserves? You always want at least 90 to preferably 120 days of O&M, and we're at that now, so we are at a good fund balance. I think we just need to change our policy and the way that we look at that.
Jumping to page 5, so ambulance fund, we're gonna have a fund balance of about 38%, which there is no official policy for this fund, I do think we should establish one, especially given, the nature of the revenues that come into this fund and the difficulty in sometimes collecting those revenues. So I think that there should be a fund balance established. I just listed in there during the 24 audit process, we did establish an uncollectible reserve of 50%, so just given that, there really should be some kind of a policy for this fund. Lake operations, as I mentioned earlier, without combining that fund with the lake improvements fund, it would be running at a deficit. That's a fund that I think you need to look at your revenues, see how they're being generated, see what the rates are, and then obviously look at your expenditures, that those are probably harder to cut or control, so maybe on the revenue side, you really need to look at it.
I'd like to point out that, any sales over the, expenditures at Eagle Ridge were intended by the previous councils to go into this fund. If it goes over the amount of expenses there, and we're getting very close to that at this point.
Yeah.
So there is a possibility of future improved revenue there.
Okay, good to know. Motor fuel tax fund, these are the tax receipts that you get from the state of Illinois, they can always be spent on street-related projects. There was a significant drawdown on that fund in the last few years, so that's probably something that you might wanna build up a little bit over the coming years, just to have, once again, reserves on hand, should cause, you know, a tornado come through and damage all your streets or something like that, that you have some funds on hand. Tourism fund is pretty healthy, amounts to about $186,000 at the end of 2026 projections. Obviously that's used to fund tourism activities within the city. So the grants fund, we are not going to budget in that fund for 2026, but it does have a fund balance, so that's really why I listed it here. We're not totally sure what that fund balance is made up of, if it's unspent grant revenues, or we just didn't end up spending as much on a project that we thought we would. We're going to have to figure out what that fund balance is made up of and allocate it applicably to the whatever fund that spending is now occurring in. So that'll take a little bit of time, so that's why we didn't combine it this year.
And it's also best practice to include the grants within the budget that the projects are actually occurring in, so that was another reason to consolidate that with each various department.
TIF funds we touched on earlier, very healthy fund balance in the TIF funds, about 4.3 is projected at the end of 2026. Business district fund, if all goes well and the sales tax are paid, you'll have about $1.9 million in there at the end of 2026, and that'll be able to be utilized for expenditures within that business district area. Long-term economic development, we did significantly draw on that this year to fund bond payments as well as to fund the TIF 4 to establish that fund. So that fund balance did go down some, but it's still pretty healthy at $1.3 million. Capital improvements fund, that's the fund that collects the capital sales tax. We did rename it. That fund will continue to collect this capital sales tax, and as Brianne just mentioned, any project that is funded by a grant, the grant revenue will go into that fund and the project will be in that fund. So we won't have like a separate grant fund where all the grants go without the spending, and then that's why all those transfers were always happening. So that'll be a little bit more consistent. This is another fund that I recommend that you, create a reserve policy for. Doesn't necessarily have to be a percent of revenues or a percent of spending, cause your spending really changes depending on the projects. But maybe it's a flat dollar amount, $1 million or something like that, that you always have on hand. Your water and sewer funds, your enterprise funds, you should always have at least 3 months of operating expenditures in those funds. That's best practice, especially for a fund that is more cyclical. You know, water demand really depends on weather, so you really wanna make sure that you have those kind of things in, you know, the money there. And a water fund is not a project that if something happens, you can put off. You know, you have to fix that water main or that water tower or that pump or whatever, it has to happen immediately. So it's always good to have those reserves. So that's just kind of an analysis of all the different funds that the city has and where you are fund balance wise. I really do think that you're very healthy with the amount of funds that you have on hand. And you just should kind of solidify it by passing some of those policies.
And if I can jump in on the water fund, we do currently transfer capital sales tax into that fund to support it. If we didn't do that, we would only have about 8.6% in reserves for annual recurring expenses. So we do need to pay very close attention to the water fund over the next few years. We have some significant expenses coming up regarding water infrastructure as well as necessary plant maintenance and upgrades, so that is something we need to really closely look at. The sewer fund is doing very well, however, we've purposely structured it that way because we have some very significant expenses coming up. We're kind of to the point we need to start looking at replacements instead of repairs, so we've been able to build that fund up a little bit in preparation for what's coming.
Yeah, and what Brianne just said too about transferring the capital sales tax there, the capital sales tax really is a governmental revenue. It really doesn't belong in an enterprise fund. Those funds are meant to be self-supporting, using only the user fees that are generated by providing those services. So having to make that transfer is not, I'm gonna use this new word a lot, it's just not best practice.
And it would also affect our ability to receive federal bonds, any assistance that we needed regarding water projects. So it's very important that we address that now before we do need to borrow anything significant.
And Marie, we talked about this in the liaison meeting with the water. You know, we outsource the water to other towns and stuff. Are those segmented where we can see, you know, how much the amount of the water district, the Litchfield portion of
I'm
that?
not sure we ever were able to get a report out of Casell.
That's something we're still working on. I do know, CAHO is booked separately because the city assisted in paying for some of their infrastructure to connect on. All of the other districts are lumped in within the budget, but it is something we're working on internally, to be able to provide a breakdown so that we can see what each district is contributing, compared to our own in-city limits and out-of-city limits users.
And without those sales, we would even run a further deficit because, you know, it doesn't cost us anything for their water line. They pay for that. There's no sewer involved. It's just specifically a sale of commodity. So.
I look at it as branches for a business. Are you making money on this branch or losing money on this branch? And I think, you know, that'd be good data to have, and we're working towards that, sounds like.
Yep.
One thing that we are seriously considering that I think that we do need to, go ahead and move forward with is every 5 years or so, you should have a professional rate study. I don't know that that's something that the city has done. So, getting an outsider in to look at our rates and be able to tell us, you know, we recommend this for each district, for city limits, look at our separate tiers, that's something we want to do to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible and so that we're charging users for what they use and not inappropriately penalizing people who maybe don't use so much water, so.
Any other questions on the fund balance section? So the next couple of pages are really just to kind of give you a broad look at where your revenue sources are coming from. So your total revenues for 2026 are about $36 million, and you can see in the chart, I'm not gonna go through it, but you can see kind of the different categories of revenues that you have. These categories are governmental standard categories, that you would put in your audit or your budget book. They have kind of, you know, intergovernmental, what a weird name, but they're just kind of the standard that's used in governmental accounting. Intergovernmental really contains all of your grants, and a couple of the state shared revenues that are more more, income-based as opposed to sales-based. Obviously, the largest one that you've got there is the taxes, that includes your property taxes, sales tax, capital sales tax, cannabis tax, a couple other ones. And the other kind of listed below what's in each category. And then there's just a snapshot on the next page that kind of just gives you a history of the revenues by type over the last couple of years. Just to kind of see how you trend in the different categories. The next two pages, page 9 to 10, do the same thing. They kind of spell out where you're spending your money. Obviously, capital outlay for the year is the biggest amount. Usually with a community, the personnel section is the largest percentage, so the fact that you're spending that much on capital is pretty good. Down below, I kind of outline what's included in each of those categories. Once again, these are governmental standard categories that you'll see when you look at an auditor budget. And then the following page does the same thing, kind of provides a history of where you're spending your money over time. You know, you've got some years in there where your capital outlay was really small, and then you've got a 2026 budget with a really robust capital plan. Okay. So this is, we don't have to go through this in detail, I just thought it was some useful information to kind of understand the structure of your personnel. 68 full-time, 2 permanent part-time, 2 temporary part-time. They're in a couple of different unions. The graph kind of breaks down your union versus non-union employees. Salaries for non-union, for union personnel is per their bargaining agreement. For non-union was 3.5% COLA for the year. That is factored into the overall personnel costs. Overall compensation costs are $6.5 million for the year. That includes salaries, benefits, pension payments, both to IMRF, Social Security, and the Police and Fire Pension Fund, as well as, like I said, the health insurance costs are in there. The graphs just kind of break down the spending by department and then the spending by type. The pension, the 20% pension is not unusual. For police and fire pension, it's most usually significantly more than 20% for those departments. And then the IMRF will bring that down to kind of the 20%. Keep going. The page 13 just kind of gives you a little bit more information on what's included in those personnel costs. The IMRF is based on a rate. Your rate did go up a little bit to 11.63%, and then I've got an assumed rate in there for the portion of 2026. And then the police and fire pension contributions are based on an actuarial valuation that is done each year. So this is the recommended contribution for fiscal year 2026 for each of those pension funds.
Hey, Ray, can I ask you something?
Yep.
I'm looking, all these charts and they're wonderful, you know, great, I can look at percentages, but I think what makes it valuable for me is either, I don't know if it's possible or common to look at like side by, you know, the charts side by side, year by year, or I didn't know if other cities have like comparable sister cities or something, cause to me it's valuable if I see we're spending X in this department, look at the historical trend. And you know what I mean, I think you break that down earlier in the package. I didn't know if it's common for cities to have charts like kind of side by side, you know what I'm saying?
Side by side.
Like for last year or last couple of years, just to see, you know, we've spent 3, and we did that with the charts earlier. I think that's not more the concern, more like, do they have sister cities they compare with, like, you know, Hillsborough or something, you know?
Yeah.
Is that common for other, I'm just curious.
It is, so if the municipalities that do the GFOA budget document, and they submit it to GFOA for the award, that's a requirement of that you have to include municipal comparisons in there. So you'll compare like your sales tax and your income tax and your larger, revenue categories, and then you'll also compare how much you spend on personnel, how much you spend on capital. I don't know that the city's ever done something like that, we absolutely can.
It wouldn't be hard to do in the future.
No, it's just doing some research and a lot of, I don't know if a lot of the downstate communities participate in the GFOA.
They do not.
That would be the hard part, if they don't have that information readily available, but.
We actually discussed this, in another community of trying to find those comps, and the GFOA kind of standardizes it, makes that information readily available. It's really hard in downstate Illinois because everyone does their budget differently, and there are no, some do their budgets like an apple, some do it like an orange bunch, so there's no good data to really grab and compare, which makes it kinda tricky. Something we could look at, yeah, it's just the data isn't readily there to grab, but if, I would say maybe instead of doing it for the whole budget, if there was a specific section that Alderman had some concerns about or really wanted to see comps on, we could laser in on that and find good comps for that area.
Yeah, I think a good comp we can easily find is what their property tax levy is, you know, how much do they depend on property taxes versus the city? You know, so there are certain ways we could kind of compare things, but it might not be that easy without having those Jackaway
Maybe for
documents.
isolated projects, it would make more sense than
In general.
yeah.
So the next section is capital. As I mentioned earlier, we did a little bit different this year. We developed a 5-year plan. We're budgeting capital more, I think, in the right fund that it belongs in. The revenue's gonna be budgeted in the same fund that the spending is in. You know, we went through a lot of meetings on this. We met with all the staff of all the departments, analyzed it, changed it, you know, moved things around. We looked at what the revenue sources were as a whole, so that we knew what our total revenue sources were for capital. You can kind of flip to the next page and see that. So there's kind of just a graph of what we're gonna spend it on, and then there's a graph of where that funding is coming from. There is a significant amount of grants involved in the capital projects for next year, which is wonderful. Though most of those are reimbursement based, so we'll have to spend the money and then submit for reimbursement. But the two graphs kind of outline what we're doing next year, and then the graph on the following page just kind of breaks down that 5-year plan that we have put together for the out years. Next year, I think we'll probably be able to do a little better job on that and make it a little bit more comparable. Think a little bit more about those out years and plan a little bit better, and then I think you'll see a graph that's not kind of sort of drastically different.
And one thing that we'll also need to pay attention to as we're applying for grants, it's wonderful to have so many. Most of them are a 50% match, and we found that while it was great that we had so many grants, the match funds did add up. So then we were finding that we had to shift some road projects, some of that, because the match funds did utilize a lot of our capital sales tax and other funding available. So we'll want to be very particular as we're applying for grants and ensure that we know which projects we want to do that next year as we're applying.
And one other thing we kind of did different this year is I think in prior years, if the grant was out there and we were gonna use it for a project, we budgeted for that grant. This year, we didn't budget for the grant unless we knew that we were going to be awarded or we already were awarded. So I think it just kind of brings your revenue and spending more in line to do it that way.
Do other cities do, we talked about O&M and others looking at expenses for grants, do other cities have thresholds that they shoot for grants, or they just kind of apply and hope to get?
I think they apply and hope to get, I think that's the grant world, cause you don't really ever
Know what you're gonna get.
Exactly, yeah, I mean, the key is though is that don't spend money until you know you've got that grant, unless you can fund it with something else if you don't get the grant.
And you also, typically you'll have to pass a resolution certifying that you have the match funds available, so it is not common for municipalities. You wouldn't apply for a grant if you weren't certain whether those match funds would be readily available.
So the following 2 pages, page 17 and 18, kind of contain and I noticed that I cut off what fund this is, that's why it looks a little weird, trying to fit it on 1 page. So this is just kind of the list of projects. The first column is what's gonna be in 2026, and then we've got the out years. So I don't know if you have any specific questions on any of the items listed in 2026, and the departments can give you some answers. I mean, there's some big projects in here. There's a lot of water main projects in the water fund. We've got some good city hall improvements in the TIF 1 fund. I know you can't see those fund names. The sewer fund doesn't have that much, but like Brianna said, I think we're kind of saving for the future in that fund. The list at the top, that's more vehicles and equipment type expenditures, those are budgeted in the general fund. I think the biggest one there is the street shed, or the maintenance shed for streets. Skyway Drive is down here, that's in your capital improvement fund, that's about $2.6 million. That pretty much has complete outside funding sources, grants, MFT, all that kind of stuff. So if you have questions on specific projects.
The projects that I think the public would maybe want to hear about
to give an example, Brent talked about grants pushing back certain projects. Crestwood, I'm in Ward 4, Crestwood Road in Crestwood, they've been wanting done for a while. An example of that was we really wanted it done, but with the budget, we had grants, we had to match fund. So Crestwood's been pushed back a year because we had to match, the grant funding. That was just a specific example I wanted the public to know about.
Any questions on the list? Page 19 just kind of spells out the debt service payments. When I looked at last year's budget, I didn't really see like this spelled out, so I think it's important, not that, I don't think it's significant. I think it's, you guys don't, the city doesn't have a lot of debt, but it is good to kind of understand what's out there. So I kind of listed what it was for, what the maturity date is, how much is outstanding, and how much we're gonna be paying in 2026. I think a couple of them are rolling out pretty soon, a couple of them we have quite a ways to go, so. And these are in different funds, either in the water fund, sewer fund, I'm sorry, water fund, ambulance, and then there's the bond fund, and then you've got the Lake subdivision note. The West Side Bond Fund is the general obligation bonds. Questions? So page 19, page 20, 21, 22, really just contains the detail of your general fund revenues in more detail than kind of the graph up front that was revenue across all funds. More to just kind of give you a general idea of the various revenues that the city has to fund its operations. It's very blended, it's very balanced. You don't depend on a single revenue source to fund the majority of your operations, which is always good. You've got a variety of revenue sources. Your tax levy is very low, so you're not property tax dependent, which is always a good thing. You've got a lot of different sales tax types. You're not, like I said, not dependent on one type. So this just kind of outlines them by, once again, the category that they fall into, but gives you a little bit more detail of what's in each category. The general fund does have that transfer in from the sales tax fund. Like I said, sales tax is a general revenue. It's absolutely fine to transfer it into your general fund. It should just be recorded there in the first place. And then there's a transfer of $940,000 from the capital fund, which is capital sales tax, and that's to fund the maintenance shed project. The next page is just kind of outlining the expenditures just of your general fund, which is your main operating fund. They're kind of repetitive, but they only contain the general fund as opposed to the all funds that you had seen previously. Just a couple of things to note, as compared to prior years when you're looking at numbers. Administration, previously economic development was a separate fund, Ritchie Endowment was a separate fund. Those have been incorporated into the administration department and general fund. Streets, capital outlay is huge because of the street maintenance, item, and then we also consolidated some funds with this into the streets department. The repair street sidewalk fund, railroad maintenance, and equipment replacement fund, so those are now reflected in the streets department in the general fund. And that's not a norm, that's really how that should be. Fire capital outlay has, some amounts budgeted. The contribution to the fire pension fund is split between the fire department and the ambulance fund instead of recording the entire amount in the fire department budget. I think we split the personnel costs, the salaries between those two funds. We should split the pension contributions in the same way. And that's a little bit different than last year. And then the police department has the DUI crime fund incorporated into it this year as opposed to a separate fund that was shown last year. And that goes back to that fund consolidation that we talked about at the beginning. So when you look at those department budgets, if you see kind of spikes or changes across the years, it might be due to kind of putting these into the 2026 budget. So the next page, really just page 25 and 26 is just a general summary of the spending of each department. And then the following pages is the detailed spending that I believe each department director is gonna go through.
So first up is administration. As Anne Marie referenced, we did combine this with the Economic Development Fund this year. I do serve in both roles, and many expenses were split 50-50 between the budgets this year. Since it's all part of the general fund, we thought it would make the most sense to combine these. We did keep the long-term economic development budget separate, as that does have very specific projects to it. The salaries in this portion include myself, our executive assistant, our mayor, alderman, and treasurer. So all of our elected officials, but the clerk, are included in this administration budget. This year's travel and conventions include 2 aldermen or elected officials attending IML this year, along with myself attending the ILCMA Winter Conference. Employee development is new, and that is for the Employee Engagement Committee initiatives. We're hoping that they'll plan some maybe a holiday party or an employee gathering, something along those lines. We do have employee and volunteer recognition that is for holiday gift cards that we provide to employees, sending flowers as needed, as well as our volunteer reception budget. Professional fees include labor and employment expenses. These are largely attorney fees. The entire city attorney contract is paid out of this budget, and then each department budgets a small amount for anything that would fall outside of that general contract. And then we did move marketing and business retention out of this fund and into the tourism and long-term economic development funds, as those areas are really where the marketing is utilized. Any questions on administration? Okay, I think we can move on to streets. Dave, would you like to come up and do streets?
Hi, everybody. This year, as in other years, we are very pleased with the budget, for the street department. I think we can do a lot of good with money. We have allocated the funds for a new storage building for our equipment, which has been desperately needed for several years. The existing building that we're using is currently a 70 by 86, and we're looking to replace it with an 80 by 120. And best we can tell, the existing building we're using was the city's first fire department. We don't know a year, but the truck that's in there is a 1919. I believe it's a year on it. Yes, it's a 1990, so figure the math there, it's been here a long time. And it needs a lot of loving, and it's just time for it to go. We've also allocated the funds to replace 2 work trucks and a tractor and more, keeping the equipment up to date and good working condition, help save the city money on costly repairs and motivates employees. Morale and overall makes for good working conditions to have the equipment that you can depend on to do the job. We have several large capital improvement projects coming up for road improvements and water line replacement, which is great for the city. We've made some changes to our oiling and chipping process that gives our oil and chip roads more attention, and each street you get a treatment of protective coating for at least every 5 years. This has all been accomplished with the cooperation of our city council, and we thank you for that opportunity.
Any questions on streets?
And
Okay. Next up is fire. Chief, did you want to do ambulance with this as well?
My presentation is fire and ambulance, so be a little longer, sorry, but just wanna hit everything. First of all, I wanna thank everybody for the opportunity to present this year. We've never been able to do it in this format, so I do, appreciate the ability to be able to, give my opinion of the way this budget went. And a big thanks to Anne Marie for simplifying this process for us and making it more understandable. This budget reflects our ongoing commitment to delivering high-quality fire protection, emergency medical services, and public safety, while ensuring financial responsibility and operational efficiency. Strategically addresses staffing needs, facility improvements, leadership development, and long-term financial sustainability through careful cost allocation and structural investments. The fire department continues to experience rising emergency call volumes, particularly in EMS. As demand grows, so does the strain on our personnel and resources. Through our reporting software, we are leveraging data-driven decision-making to improve response times and optimize resource development. However, with increasing call volumes, our current staffing levels are being stretched thin, impacting daily staffing and firefighter paramedic well-being. So this budget presented in front of you has staffing adjustments. This budget adds 2 full-time personnel, shifting costs from overtime to salaries to increase daily staffing while reducing reliance on costly overtime expenditures This move helps improve coverage, efficiency, and work-life balance for personnel. Pension cost reallocation to more accurately reflect the division of services within the department. Pension costs have been shifted from being fully absorbed by the fire budget to an 80-20 split with the ambulance fund. Ambulance fund sustainability. Rather than relying on a general fund transfer, the department will use reserves built into the ambulance fund to cover the pension cost shift this year. Moving forward, rising revenues are expected to sustain this expense, ensuring long-term financial viability without additional subsidies from the general fund. We also have that payment on the ambulance loan that was, had to be done because of the ambulance that got wrecked. So that'll be an expense, I believe, that falls off next year, which should then in turn just absorb that pension shift. Facility investments, the building improvement line includes funding for upgrading the training facility to enhance firefighter preparedness and striving for NFPA and Illinois Office of the State Fire Marshal compliance. Repairing the hazardous front approach at Station 1, improving safety for the personnel and public. Beginning the renovation of Station 1, which was originally built in 1980 and last received a light remodel in 2009. Modernizing this facility is critical to meeting today's operational demands and future growth. Training and leadership development. The fire and ambulance training budgets have increased significantly this year to support the hiring of new personnel and the development of senior members for leadership roles. Succession planning is a critical component of this budget, ensuring that Litchfield is not left with a leadership gap in the future. Training efforts focus on command leadership, advanced firefighting tactics, EMS, officer development, and strengthening our department's long-term stability. In conclusion, this budget allows us to enhance public safety, modernize facilities, invest in future leadership, and sustain a reliable workforce while maintaining financial accountability. I appreciate your continued support and welcome any questions as we work together to strengthen fire and EMS services in Litchfield.
Any questions on fire or ambulance? Next, we have Chief Reichert.
Good evening. I would call this budget more of a maintenance status quo budget. It's more heavily driven on maintaining the staff that we've increased. We have joined up several of our line items where our salary overtime used to be delineated out between different positions, but now it is all contained within that top line, and then the overtime. You'll notice like some decreases. Our holiday had temporarily decreased. We've been incredibly short-staffed, so those line items depend on how many people are working. Some of these other items are really status quo. They're just living within the same realm that they have. There's animal control was added. That contains enough to cover both per capita expense and any additional expenses that may occur. Vehicle repair and fuel have remained consistent for several years, but you'll notice that fuel consumption is down. That's also attributed to the fact that we have less people driving cars over the last several years. Our radio remains pretty static. There's a little increase in body camera data storage due to adding additional cameras because of data storage, and those cameras go through rough days on a shirt in the police department. There are some increases within like our telephone line item. We've added all of our internet capabilities, all that have been joined in to one item. DUI anti-crime fund being added to this. That's something we rely on heavily for equipment purchases that may not be expected. And generally in this budget, we have no large projects. We just want to keep the people working. We're on a little hiatus for vehicles because we're there outside of some type of staffing change or assignment change motion. We should be good for a while on our cars, which is generally one of our bigger expenses out of what was the equipment replacement fund, which is now capital improvement. So we have nothing in the capital improvement. And this budget here is increasing 1.5% from the previous after adding a whole person. So our people work pretty hard on that. Thanks. Yeah.
I try, I'm sorry. The school resource officer position, has that been eliminated completely?
No, it's included in
It's just
here.
included in the rest of it?
Last year, they chose to give a smaller contribution and it changed to, and this actually helped us. So the officer that is assigned continues to work their regular shift, but on the days the school is in session, they are assigned to the school.
Okay.
They-
There's just no line item for it, I was
Yeah,
just-
they got lumped into salaries, all of our positions are all in that top line item, and then in, some news, Shane is ending his tenure as our SRO, so we're gonna have a new one coming in next year, so the contribution is a little bit less, cause it's a less tenured officer, but, he did a really good job, so, we'll recognize him at a later date.
Thanks, Kenny.
Anybody
Any other questions? Perfect, thank you.
almost made it, you got it.
Building and grounds, Mr. Baker.
Well, building and grounds, a lot of money on the building and grounds is general maintenance and protecting the buildings that we have. Some of them need some remodeling done, some of them are just general maintenance that happens year after year. Like City Hall, we've got a ton of money invested in this furnace system, HVAC system. This is preventive maintenance done by the new houses, which put the system in. Kind of the same with Carnegie. The systems are very expensive, that looks like a lot of money to spend, but they come in probably 4 times a year, clean the system, change filters, check all the pressures. It keeps us from having major problems down the road. The rest of them are just kind of a yearly expense on keeping things status quo. Nothing really is a large purchase. The mowing, that is our bid price, plus we've had to add some, try and project how many lots we're gonna have to mow on top of what wasn't turned in, which is a $40 mow per property. We never know how many we're gonna have. Some years people take care of it, some people don't. So it's just kind of a guesstimate where we're gonna be there when we go for coverage. Other than that, it pretty well is the status quo and everything. We just wanna keep everything up that we've got before we have to spend more buying new.
Any questions?
What about the property taxes? Are those properties we've acquired and haven't been exempted yet after the city owns them? Cause I noticed there's a property tax tab.
Yes, some of them are, if they're development related, we are required by the state to pay property tax on them. This is if we acquire any, we do feel that we have a significant amount in property tax budgeted. So one thing that we would like to do this year is request a list from the county on all properties that we're paying taxes on and make sure that those exemption forms are correctly filed and that we're not paying taxes on anything that we wouldn't need to be.
Gotcha.
Very few of the properties that we demo, we end up with the property anymore. So it's part of the grant.
Okay,
Anything else?
thank you.
Good.
Okay, finance department, Ken?
Hello. So for the finance department, this year, we're going to kind of keep things status quo for the most part. You'll see that there is a little bit in there for, some travel and conventions. So, I hope to go to the IML conference in Chicago and then, the civic symposium or get some training for my staff, a little bit more for our civic, portal. I think that, we don't have any large projects planned, right now. We're trying to kind of see what we can do to upgrade the system so that our customers can access bills online, make it easier for them to pay online. We're coming up with creative ways to deal with this mail issue that we're having right now. So, you know, we're not planning on any big projects, but, you know, we'll do what we need to do to make sure that we can get the bills in the hands of our customers, on time, so that they can make payments. And so far, this month seems to be better than the prior couple of months. So, You had reports as early as Monday that people have already received their water bills, so that's looking good. And there really isn't a whole lot that we are changing in the finance department right now. Does anybody have any questions for me?
If I could. So I think if you notice the auditing fees, we have $112,000 in '25, and we've got $52,400 in 2026. So we did go out and do an RFP, we do have a new auditor, we think it's gonna go much, much smoother than in the past, and those fees are gonna be significantly less, so that's a good thing.
Okay, building and zoning. You're up again.
I'm the cheap date. Doesn't cost much to make me happy. So personnel services pretty well is uniform with every year. Just a small increase in certain places, salaries, taxes, RF, retirement, all uniform, travel, contractual services, professional fees, with the new rebuilding of the budget lines, part of these fees we have set back in the Tilton fund, but they come out of my line item on the budget. Same with demolition, the strong communities program, we've got that full amount included in this demolition. And this is money that gets returned, as we complete these projects, we get the money back. But it's a line item on the budget, we get so we know we're covered. As far as, professional services for the demos, a lot of it is returned. If we do anything out of the scope of the Strong Community Grant, we have to pay for the services. Other than that, maintenance, typical vehicle maintenance, we've got money in, we're updating the zoning map this year, so that's included in the GIS support. There again, the demos, Strong Communities cover the biggest part of that. We do have some in there over and above the Strong Community money, in case we've got some commercial properties that are starting to look rough, that we cannot turn into Strong Communities. Anything we do commercially, we've got to pay for ourselves. So we do have a little built in for that. Other than that, everything's pretty well status quo. Just natural increases year by year. And if you wanna make it more, that's fine too.
Any questions? Okay, perfect, thank you.
Good.
Okay, we've already done ambulance fund, so we can skip over that one. Lake operations, Heather.
I appreciate the opportunity to provide an update on the lake operations fund and highlight some key areas of focus for this budget cycle. To streamline our financial management, we've combined the vehicle repair, equipment repair, and repairs maintenance budget lines, as well as the shop equipment and supplies and material budget lines into two single categories. These adjustments will allow for greater efficiency in tracking expenditures while maintaining the same level of service and upkeep for our equipment and facilities. One of our most pressing needs is the replacement of our backhoe. The current unit is aging, it's used daily for essential maintenance, and it has an ongoing mechanical issues and hydraulic fluid leaks that present both operational and environmental concerns. A new backhoe is critical investment to ensure we can continue maintaining the lake and park infrastructure efficiently. Looking ahead, we are excited about the campground expansion, set to begin this late summer, early fall. This project will increase our annual campsite revenue by adding more sites to meet growing demand. These additional sites will contribute directly to the sustainability of our lake operations fund. Currently, we are making improvements to the beach area and expanding the space to better accommodate visitors and enhance their experience. We are streamlining the beach admission process by adding a new admission area and moving the concession counter to be separate from the kitchen area, making it easier and more efficient for guests to access and enjoy the beach. Another current key focus is creating a pavilion and playground area for the bicentennial campground that has been requested for some time by the campers, as well as bringing the park area up to date, making it more visually appealing and welcoming for visitors. These improvements will enhance the overall experience and encourage more community use. Additionally, we are investing in new wayfinding signs throughout the park and surrounding area, making it easier for guests to navigate the area and enjoy all the amenities we offer. These signs are paid for by a generous Hilton Fund donation will be put in place within the next few months. Beyond the infrastructure, we are actively working on lake management efforts, focusing on watershed and sediment control, soil erosion prevention, and water retention strategies. These efforts are crucial to improving water quality and ensuring long-term health of our lake. Lastly, I've been attending conferences, local soil and water conservation, and Illinois Farm Bureau meetings to stay informed on best practices, funding opportunities, and lake management strategies, allowing us to implement the most effective solutions for our community. These strategic updates ensure we are maintaining and enhancing the lake facilities for long-term success. And I thank you for your time and continued support, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. No questions?
Next is our sales tax fund.
So we talked a little bit about this fund already, your general sales tax go into this fund, and then if you can kind of look below, all we do is transfer money out of this fund to the various funds. Not quite as many transfers as in prior years due to the consolidation of funds. We've got $1.6 million going to the general fund, and that's it. This fund has an estimated $3.1 million fund balance at the end of 2026 that will end up transferring to the general fund when we start 2027. Some of these are smaller, civil defense funds, their property tax revenue goes into there, and then various spending, that is needed. I think the ambulance, or not the ambulance, the tornado siren revenue, repair and maintenance will be budgeted in this fund. You don't see it right now because we missed it, but we're gonna add that before you approve the final budget. Motor fuel tax fund, we talked about it a little bit, taxes received by the state, both the motor fuel and the transportation renewal fund, and spent on street related expenditures. Tourism fund is next.
Stacy?
Hi. I've been here for over 2 years, and it's my first time at the podium.
Welcome.
Thank you. Most of my expenditures are pretty mundane, but I did wanna point out the marketing fund. Half of that, 40,000, goes to the Great River Routes, destination marketing agency that we use. The other half I use for the print publications, a couple of billboards, and we're also moving more into digital now. Over the past couple of years, I've kind of researched where we've been advertising in the past and making sure that the markets that we want to be hitting. In doing so, I've added a couple other places, reaching more deeper into St. Louis and beyond into the West County area, a little farther, north in Springfield. So hopefully we're catching all those. The other area I wanted to point out was the Farmers Market. The expenditures for that are around 41,000. It costs that much to put on a party 6 times a year. And for that, we pay for merchandise that we sell at the tourism booth, sanitation and trash services, advertising, musicians, and we make a donation to the Litchfield Junior Panthers for their help in parking. Other than that, there was one thing for our fireworks. It's listed here as 20,000. We just got the bid on that and signed a contract for 24,200. That's about it.
Stacy, would you share as well, I know we've covered revenues, but I did want them to hear how the last couple of years on the Pickers Market have done. You've done a really great job promoting it, and I just would
Yeah.
like the council to hear those results.
It is doing really well. For fiscal year '24, last fiscal year, we had the highest number that we've hit for revenues since COVID hit. So we continue to go up every year and moving in the right direction.
Stacy, are we still waiting for Great Rivers and Routes to give us some guidance on the birthday for Route 66 next year?
They've started up and backed off and started up and backed off, so we really don't have a definite plan yet. I think next month or later this month, we're meeting with them again, so hopefully we'll have more news on that.
The governor's committee hasn't met.
Right, yes.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
They're probably gonna throw out local communities to do their own thing, with some coordination, so that people can make a trip and actually, enjoy those activities, so, you may have to go over budget for some, at that point, if you don't know you don't know what it's.
We don't know what we're doing right now. The only thing that did come up, I had a documentary filmmaker get in touch with me. He's been filming, I think he filmed in March and probably this month, Litchfield, so they asked us if we wanted Litchfield to be included, and I said, yeah. So they wouldn't have a viewing of the film in 2026 in June at the Skyview. But then he backed out of that. He said the state is taking over that project, so I don't know if that's out right now either.
Well, at the minimum, we're gonna need some new signpost banners and Dave's department repainting the badges on the
Right.
pavement.
And we do have some other things in, projects in the works for that, the grant that we received from Great Rivers and Routes.
Any other questions for Stacy?
Thank you.
And I do want to note for projects, such as this, that may be unexpected or we have to adjust, we do plan on doing quarterly budget amendments, so that you're always getting an updated picture of what our budget looks like. Okay, next we have the grant fund. As Marie mentioned, we are no longer utilizing this fund, we'll be plugging it into the departments that are utilizing the grants. However, we do have a remaining fund balance, so we wanted to be able to show you that here. Most of the funding, we do have noted on which grant category they fall into. Some of it we're still researching. I think most of that is local grants. We just need to find out exactly which projects those dollar amounts were allocated to so that we can put it in the right place. Okay, next is TIP 1, which is me. So we have 4 TIP districts now in Litchfield. TIP 1 is our largest TIP district by far, and it generates about 1.336 million per year, and then 30% of that is distributed out to our taxing bodies. That's because we're on an extension, and typically with an extension, you do negotiate with your taxing bodies to share some of that revenue. This leaves the city with about $950,000 in increment each year, and this TIP does expire in 2033. Second extensions are very rare, so we do expect it to expire at that time. This year we have funds budgeted for City Hall, which includes tuck pointing, window replacements, updating the restrooms and addressing plumbing issues, and also upgrading signage of City Hall. We also anticipate to issue about 5 facade grants in this TIP district, and they go up to $10,000 a piece. And then we do have about $330,000 committed this year for 8 development agreements, and that covers 11 addresses, so we expect to see a lot of improvements this year, which is great. We do have room in the budget for an additional $260,000, so if we do have any projects come our way, we're able to assist with those as well. Major infrastructure improvements this year consist of the replacement of the water main on State Street from Sargent to Henricks, so all of our downtown corridor. That will be a huge project that will take a lot of collaboration, but I know our local businesses will appreciate that. Also repaving Edward Street from State to Jackson, and then also with our DCEO Rebuild Main Streets grant, we will be finishing out work on the Carnegie Building and also adding improvements to 491 State Street, which is the vacant lot across the street. That is it for TIP 1. Any questions on that? And I will note, there's been a lot of discussion on TIP. It is a very powerful tool. I do want everyone to remember that this is roughly 2% of our budget, so while it is very important, we don't want to put too much emphasis on it because it is a very small portion of the city's funds. TIP 2, not within an extension and you don't negotiate with taxing bodies in that first 23-year term. This TIF expires in 2032. We did budget for 2 facade grants in case the need comes up, and we have a development agreement with a commitment of $29,000 budgeted for this TIF. We also budgeted about $45,000 for any additional projects that would come up in this area. Okay, any questions on TIF 2? Okay. TIF number 3, this fund is even smaller, generating about $35,000 to $45,000 per year. It expires in 2032. There are no ongoing expenditures or projects in this district. We did budget $10,000 for a facade grant and $10,000 for a development agreement should a need arise in this district. I will note that if we have any large projects in TIFs 2 or 3, you are able to port funds between TIF districts as long as they're contiguous. All of ours are. So while we wouldn't be able necessarily to fund a huge project with the TIF 2 or 3 revenues in themselves, we always could transfer from TIF 1 if we needed to look at that. Okay, last is TIF 4. This is our residential TIF that just started. As planned, we are reporting in about $2 million from the general fund, which will be paid back through increment over time. The developer incentives for the new residential subdivision that we have approved total $1.6 million this year, and then also expenses for creating that TIF, which is consultant fees, can be reimbursed through this TIF district. We do not necessarily know what the increment will be at this given time. It will be low until we start seeing that development, so we're excited to see that take place. Any questions on this TIF? Okay. Next is the business district fund. This fund is also newly established, and the state of Illinois is about 3 months behind on their revenue reporting at all times, so we really won't know exactly what this fund is bringing in per month until later this April, so we're excited to see what that comes out to be. What we did was take an average of our sales tax, how much we thought was covered in this district. It should generate up to $1.9 million per year. It could be a little less, it could be a little more. We should have a true depiction of that within a month or so. Because this is a new fund, you always want your funds to grow a little bit before you start spending out of them. We don't have any business assistance programs created. We want to keep utilizing our TIF funds for a couple of years, let this fund mature. The only expense that I do think we will probably utilize out of the business district this year is commercial demolitions. As Gary mentioned, we have $100,000 budgeted in the building and zoning fund for commercial demolitions. I believe we also have $50,000 budgeted in TIF 1. Unfortunately, commercial code enforcement is very important. It's something we're really ramping up on because it's important for people in that area too. It protects the surrounding area. So if we do have a lot of demolitions come our way, if we can't get property owners to comply, we probably will have to take some funding out of this business district in order to accomplish those demolitions. So that is something that we could be utilizing funds for. Okay. The IDOT maintenance shed fund, it's for extending the water line out to the IDOT maintenance shed. This is all going to be reimbursed by the state of Illinois. We just keep it in a separate fund to ensure that we're tracking that project. So, any questions there? And then my last fund for you guys is long-term economic development. So we did keep this fund separate this year. We felt that it was important due to the projects that come out of this fund. We're anticipating to receive grants associated with the West Side Industrial Park. Actually, we received one today, which is exciting. We were a sub-recipient of the county's grant, so we got a check for $408,000 today since we've completed the gas line project. So we can cross that one off. That's hitting this fiscal year, not next. DCEO's grant is roughly $2 million, and we're hoping to receive that this fiscal year, but it may hit in fiscal year 26, and you may see that revenue spill over. But all of the infrastructure improvements and the utilities are completed in the industrial park, so you won't see nearly as much spending out of this account as you have in years past. The major project for the fund this year is the transfer into TIF number 4 for the residential subdivision, and also the transfer to the bond fund for the West Side Industrial Park bond payment. We do have an agreement with a local dealership budgeted for $40,000. I believe this is the last year for that agreement. We also have, about $20,000 in CDBG match funds. That's for our home repair assistance program that we hope to keep offering to citizens. One thing that is unbudgeted, this fund would be utilized for any assistance that the Economic Development Commission, followed by the City Council, determines that they wish to provide to the LUC Rec Center. That is a proposal on the table. We really weren't sure if we do contribute, which fiscal year that would fall into, so that's something that, that may need to be incorporated should we decide to financially participate in that project. Any questions there? Okay. We can be done hearing my voice now, and then we'll move on to the police seizure fund. Yep.
So police seizure fund, seizures that come in that are forfeited, we receive, we're able to spend those funds on specific items. We don't usually budget for money coming in or the spending because we have absolutely no idea if it's going to happen or not. The foreign fire tax fund, I'm a little confused on this one, we don't have any revenue for 2025. We did not budget for 2026, and then this is really the same thing, we don't usually budget for the expenditure because we're not actually sure of what's going to occur. Lake subdivision fund, I believe this is the fund where the sales of the lots, the revenue went into this fund, and now it's being, those revenues are being utilized to pay the loan that was taken out for the infrastructure improvements within the Eagle Ridge subdivision. So this fund will eventually evaporate when, the funds will run out, there won't be a purpose for it. You may keep it because something else is put into this fund, or you may just kind of combine it with the lake operations fund. The city loan fund is, we make loans to businesses that apply, so this reports the revenues that we're receiving from those loans that have been made. I believe the initial funding source was, transfer from the general fund quite a few years ago. This fund does run at a deficit, so we didn't budget that transfer out to the general fund this year because we're gonna wait until we're actually having positive
Actually,
funds.
the original source of that was a $1 million grant from the state that we had to repay
Oh,
because other communities have used this situation, so they called it all back.
Oh.
It was federal money that funneled through the state, and I believe that last payment on that we've just made or coming up soon.
We're not making any payments currently, so it's.
yeah.
Okay,
At
then
least
it's
not
gone.
that we know of.
No.
Then it's gone.
Okay, good. It's not budgeted.
That's where it started.
Yeah.
Okay.
Debt service fund, you only have one debt service fund, you have one general obligation bond out there, and this is the repayment of those bonds. When those bonds are paid off, this fund, any remaining revenue in this fund, mostly coming from interest earnings, you are able to transfer to your general operating funds. Capital improvement fund, we kind of talked about the CIP, budget already. This is the fund that the majority of your non-enterprise, non-TIF capital spending is budgeted in. You'll see we've got the capital sales tax at the top, we've got grant receipts for various grants that are funding projects listed below. We are transferring out the $940,000 to the general fund to pay for the street maintenance building. So that probably won't recur every year where we transfer out, there just happened to be a large expenditure in the general fund that we felt it was easier or better to use the capital sales tax instead of borrowing to fund that project. And then the following, the section, the enterprise funds, is the water and sewer funds.
Water. What can I say? It's wet and we can send it uphill because we have salaries are spread across several departments, the operators at the treatment plant, staff members and department head at the street department, and several members within City Hall complex as well. You'll notice there's a line item called lab fees and one called lab supplies. They're different in the fact that the lab fees include samples that we have to send out to certified labs for testing, and the lab supplies are the testing that we do in-house every 4 hours. 3 years ago, the EPA added a lot more in-house testing, that's required daily. That increased our expenditure $1,000 a month immediately. So we're prone to things like that happen. The water plant building maintenance, it actually sounds misleading. It's not the water plant building. It's actually the maintenance of the equipment itself. The water plant is now 16 years old. A lot of that equipment was started up in April of 2009 and has not been shut down since. So if you notice over the years, that particular one line item is growing. A lot of this equipment, is outliving its life expectancy, particularly a lot of the electronics. The electronics seem to be high dollar items and they don't seem to last very long. Chemicals, obviously, it's a sliding scale. We bid them out every year. Some things go up, some things go down. It's kind of a wash. The pandemic, we really took a big hit. There was a lot of suppliers that, the distributors stopped distributing to them. So we were left with fewer bidders. That's now starting to open up. We're starting to see a lot more bidders. We're starting to see some better pricing. So hopefully, we can get better pricing in the future. You also have to remember though that we're treating more water than we ever did before because we're selling more water to other communities, other people. And if you're treating more water, you're using more chemical, you're using more energy. Any questions?
Hey, Ray, I got a question. With the salaries and overtime, you've had a position open for a while, right? Has overtime been more historically lately because we aren't able to fill that position?
Well, in the last few years, there's been a bit of a revolving door. The city of Litchfield has fell behind in salaries. Other communities in the area actually pay more and they do not have a residency requirement. So we've actually lost personnel to other surrounding communities. Also, we do have one position open that is a floater, fills in for whenever somebody is gone. We're a 24/7 operation. There's 21 shifts to fill every week. That includes midnights, weekends, and holidays. A lot of younger people don't seem to be prone to want to do that type of work nowadays. So it's a situation that the city's definitely gonna have to address in the future.
And as Ray did note, some of the equipment in the water treatment facility, although we still think of it as new, is exceeding its life expectancy. So currently, we're undergoing a 25-year, plan for the sewer treatment facility and doing a capital improvement plan to see exactly what equipment needs to be replaced, how we go about that. I would recommend that after we get that plan done for sewer, we do the same for water so that we don't fall behind on those repairs and replacements. It's really important to stay up on all of that, because it does save in the long run, so.
It's actually ironic to think that the membrane system's actually now 13 years old. And the cartridges were only supposed to last 10 years. But I've developed my own cleaning and operating procedures that we use on it, and I've been able to extend that past the 10-year life expectancy. Not sure, how far we can go, but I'm gonna push it as far as we can.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Okay, sewer.
Hello, everyone. So our sewer department budget outlook for this year, coming year, this year our sewer department, we're focused on long-term improvements, as Graham stated earlier. Our sewer department is broke down into two sections. So we have the treatment plant, which is very important, and we also have our collection system, which is just as important. The collection system is mainly our sewer lines, the gravity and the pump stations that gets everything back to the treatment plant. Our sewer treatment plant, was built in stages. Some parts of it is pushing 70 years old and more, and some of the newer parts are pushing 25 to 30 years as they stated. Most of the original collection system in our town is 100 years old. These are the sewer lines that's flowing through town. We actually have sewer lines that are made of brick. In the old days, back in the 10s, 20s, and 30s, they actually mortared brick like a chimney, but it laid sideways, and that's still how they currently are today. We have some as big as 76 inches where you could actually walk through the sewer line. But, you know, all that takes, maintenance and care to keep it going for longer. Our system was built as a combined sewer system, meaning that it collects stormwater plus the domestic wastewater. The treatment process for treating all the extra stormwater that runs into the plant takes a large toll on our equipment. Therefore, it wears out the parts in a shorter amount of time frame than the newly built sewer treatment plants from other towns, that only handle domestic water. We are kind of unique in having a combined sewer system. It's not unheard of, but, most towns they just handle their domestic water. You also have to consider the extra cost of chemicals, as, Ray was just saying, we have to use chemicals that treat the wastewater as well. Our focus beginning in 2026 fiscal year is to update our treatment plant. As a little bit expensive, as Brianne had stated, we're doing a study with it now. And we could be looking at anywhere from $15 to $30 million to bring it back up to par, for proper treatment. We will have to do this in stages, to update all the components of the processing. We will also be working on separating the storm water runoff away from the, domestic water, which will help save money and, this will also be a long-term project that can take up to 20 years due to the cost involved in getting everything separated. One thing to keep in mind is our sewer department is classified as an enterprise fund, as, Emery had stated, meaning it should be self-supporting. We recommend that policy be set to maintain a separate fund of at least 3 months of recurring operational expenses. With something like a sewer plant, it's just like we had last year. We had a major malfunction where some pumps had broke down, and it cost a lot of money to get it back up running again. So we need to build some reserve funds to be able to have money available to make these emergency repairs. By starting on this now, we will be able to discharge a much cleaner water to the environment and eliminate the backups and overflows in the homes during heavy rain events. With the cooperation of the city, we can make this work, and thank you. Any questions?
Bill, I'd like to add that the $5 maintenance fee that's on the water bills now, $2.50 for sewer, $2.50 for water, is for just what you said, for maintenance and improvements.
Okay.
And of course, our water rates don't cover the total expenses of at least water, and hasn't in the past for sewer.
Okay.
But, that $5 maintenance charge is for maintenance and, improvements.
It's good
It
enough.
doesn't add up as quick as we need it.
Right, I
That's
think
what
it comes to around 230,000 a year, but still, you know, that's pretty good.
Yeah, but that was the intent of that.
Okay, very good.
I will note that you will see salaries, minimal salaries. The sewer plant is contracted out to Veolia, huge thanks to John and his team. They do a great job of
Yeah.
keeping it running and keeping the city informed on that. The salaries that are allocated to it, we do allocate some street salaries because they are repairing our sewer infrastructure, as well as utility billing because they're sending out those sewer bills. So, John, anything that you would like to add?
No, does anybody have any questions?
I'd like to thank Anne Marie for a great job in working with Brianne to get this, budget, and all the good news you brought to us. And this will be my last budget, but, I think, you're all filled in now on the possibilities coming. I would like to recognize the professionalism of all of our department heads. They really do a great job, and, now they're more aware of what the budget is, so I'm sure that it'll be even better, but, we build a war chest to maintain the city and make it grow, and it's up to you, 8 people, to make the right decisions.
And Marie, do you have anything to?
Yeah, just a couple things, so, the budget will be formally approved by ordinance on the 17th. There'll be a public hearing that night before, that the public can come and ask questions. It'll be approved that night. We are probably gonna make a few changes, a few of them were mentioned tonight, so we'll bring you a revised version of the budget, and we'll outline the changes that we made along with the dollar amount of those changes, just so you're aware of that. And then, going forward, we're gonna develop a report, and we're gonna give the council budget to actual reports on a quarterly basis, so that you'll be able to kind of track what's going on going forward, and we'll do it for all funds. Obviously, the general fund's probably gonna be the one you're gonna pay the most attention to, but we'll do it for all funds.
Okay, so I have a motion to adjourn. Alderman Garrell, Alderman Colbert, would you like to have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.